Strangers fought to save me in war. At home, the one I loved destroyed me.
The garage door sensor beeped at 3:47 a.m., and Ethan Reed knew his marriage was over. He'd been lying awake for 2 hours, staring at the ceiling of their bedroom, while Julia's side of the bed remained cold and empty. The sensor's electronic chirp cut through the silence like a blade. His wife was finally coming home from her double shift at the hospital. Ethan didn't move, didn't breathe. Just listened as Julia's Honda Civic whispered into the garage below their bedroom, the engine ticking as it cooled. Her footsteps were careful on the stairs, practiced in their stealth. The bathroom door clicked shut. Water ran for exactly 4 minutes. Enough time to wash away evidence, but not enough to wake a sleeping husband. When she slipped into bed beside him, Julia smelled like soap and lies. Ethan kept his breathing steady, eyes closed, while his mind cataloged every detail. The way she positioned herself at the very edge of the mattress, how she'd showered at home instead of at work, like she always did after long shifts. The faint scent of cologne that wasn't his lingering beneath the soap. 3 weeks of extra shifts, 3 weeks of late-night emergencies at the hospital. 3 weeks of Julia claiming the ER was understaffed while her paychecks remained exactly the same. At 4:15 a.m., Julia's breathing finally deepened into sleep. Ethan opened his eyes and stared at the woman he'd loved for 8 years, the woman who'd promised to stand by him through everything, the woman who was methodically destroying their life together. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from his foreman at the shop. "Emergency call on Maple Street, water heater burst. Can you cover?" Ethan almost laughed at the irony. While his wife was out destroying their marriage, he was being called to fix someone else's disaster. He dressed quietly and drove through the empty streets, his mind already working. Ethan Reed had survived 2 tours in Afghanistan by staying calm under pressure, by observing everything, by planning 3 moves ahead. Those skills hadn't dulled in civilian life. He just never needed to use them against the person sleeping next to him. The emergency call was legitimate. Mrs. Henderson's basement was flooding, and Ethan spent 4 hours installing a new water heater while his marriage died in the background of his thoughts. When he returned home at 9 a.m., Julia was making coffee and humming, actually humming, like she was happy. "How was the night shift?" he asked, accepting the mug she offered. "Exhausting," she said without meeting his eyes. 3 car accident victims came in around midnight. I didn't get a break until almost 4. Ethan sipped his coffee and nodded. Julia was a good liar. She'd had practice. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail. Ethan knew the night shift charge nurse. They'd gone to high school together. "I might stop by later to check on you," he said casually. "See if you need anything." For just a moment, panic flickered across Julia's face. Then she smiled and kissed his cheek. "That's sweet, but we're not supposed to have visitors. New hospital policy?" Another lie. Ethan finished his coffee and headed to the shop, his plan already forming. Over the next week, Ethan became a student of his wife's deception. He memorized her schedule, cataloged her lies, and discovered that Julia's betrayal was even more elaborate than he'd imagined. She wasn't working extra shifts. The hospital confirmed she'd actually reduced her hours 3 weeks ago. She wasn't staying late for emergencies, and she definitely wasn't alone. Ethan's neighbor, Liam Coyle, was a smooth-talking HVAC contractor who'd lived 2 houses down for 5 years. They'd been friendly, barbecues, borrowed tools, the occasional beer. 2 years ago, when Liam's business was struggling with a wrongful termination lawsuit, Ethan had connected him with a good lawyer and even testified as a character witness. Liam's business had recovered. His gratitude, apparently, had not. The surveillance was simpler than expected. Liam's house faced the woods behind their subdivision, invisible from the street, but perfectly visible from the hiking trail Ethan had helped clear the previous spring. A pair of binoculars and patience were all he needed. On Thursday evening, while Julia claimed to be covering a colleague's shift, Ethan watched her car pull into Liam's driveway at 8:23 p.m. Through Liam's kitchen window, he saw them embrace with the familiarity of longtime lovers, not new ones. This wasn't a recent mistake. This was a relationship. Ethan sat on that revelation for 3 days, watching his wife lie to his face while she planned their evenings together. Friday night, another emergency shift. Saturday, helping Ava move apartments. Sunday, mandatory training seminar. Each lie was delivered with the kind of casual confidence that comes from months of practice. But it was Sunday evening, while Julia was supposedly at her training seminar, that Ethan discovered the true scope of her betrayal. He'd never checked their joint bank account obsessively. He trusted Julia to manage their finances while he focused on growing the shop. Now, sitting at his laptop in the garage where Julia never went, Ethan discovered that trust had been weaponized against him. 6 months of steady withdrawals. Small amounts, never enough to trigger alerts, but adding up to nearly $15,000. The money had been moved to an account he didn't recognize, one that required both Julia's and someone else's signatures. The co-signer was Ava Thompson, Julia's best friend from nursing school. Ethan stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. This wasn't just an affair. This was theft. This was conspiracy. This was two women treating him like a mark in a long con. His phone buzzed with a text from Julia. "Seminar running late. Don't wait up. Love you." Ethan set the phone down carefully and walked to his workbench. His hands moved automatically, organizing tools that were already organized, while his mind processed the magnitude of his situation. Julia had been planning to leave him for months. She'd enlisted Ava to help steal their savings. They'd been methodical, patient, smart. By the time Ethan realized what was happening, they'd intended for it to be too late for him to stop them. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated who they were dealing with. The garage door sensor beeped at 11:47 p.m. Ethan was waiting in the kitchen, sitting at their small table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "You're up late," Julia said, hanging her purse on the hook by the door. "Couldn't sleep," Ethan replied. "How was the seminar?" "Boring, but necessary. New protocols for trauma patients." She moved to the refrigerator, her back to him. "You should get some rest." "You look tired." "I've been thinking about our finances," Ethan said quietly. Julia's hand froze on the refrigerator handle. "What about them?" "Just wondering if we should plan a vacation. It's been a while since we did something nice together." The relief in Julia's shoulders was visible. "That sounds wonderful. Let me look at our budget this week." Ethan nodded and stood up. "Good night, Julia." "Good night, honey." As he climbed the stairs, Ethan's mind was already 3 moves ahead. Julia thought she was playing chess, but she'd just entered a war, and Ethan Reed had never lost a war. Monday morning, Ethan called in a favor. Detective Rick Hall had been bringing his cruiser to Ethan's shop for 3 years. They'd developed the kind of friendship built on mutual respect. Rick appreciated honest work at fair prices, and Ethan appreciated having a cop who didn't treat him like a criminal just because he had tattoos and worked with his hands. "I need some advice," Ethan said when Rick stopped by to pick up his patrol car. "Hypothetically," Rick raised an eyebrow. "Hypothetically? If someone suspected their spouse was stealing from joint accounts, what would be the best way to document it?" "Hypothetically?" Rick's voice carried a warning. "Document everything. Bank records, transaction histories, any communication that shows intent. And get a lawyer before you do anything stupid." Ethan nodded. "What defines stupid?" "Anything that could be construed as harassment, stalking, or intimidation. The system's set up to protect both parties in a divorce, but it's also set up to screw over the person who acts first without thinking." "And if the spouse filed for divorce first?" Rick's expression grew serious. "Then you're already behind." "How hypothetical is this conversation, Ethan?" "I'll let you know." That afternoon, Ethan sat in the office of Kendra Weiss, a divorce attorney whose reputation for aggressiveness was matched only by her track record of success. Her office was spartanly functional. No family photos, no personal touches, just law books and filing cabinets. "Your wife filed 3 days ago," Kendra said without preamble, sliding a manila folder across her desk. "Irreconcilable differences, seeking spousal support and half of all assets. She's represented by Hamilton and Associates." Ethan opened the folder and read his wife's signature at the bottom of papers that would dissolve their marriage. The date was stamped 5 days ago. Julia had been planning this while lying in bed next to him. "She moved fast," Kendra continued. "That suggests she's been planning this for a while." "Do you have any evidence of adultery?" "Some. Financial misconduct?" "Possibly." Kendra leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Reed, I'm going to be blunt. Your wife's attorneys are good, and they've had time to prepare. If you want to avoid being cleaned out, you need to start thinking strategically instead of emotionally." "What does that mean?" "It means we need to control the narrative before she does. It means we need evidence, not suspicions." and it means you need to decide how far you're willing to go to protect yourself. Ethan left Kendra's office with a retainer agreement and a list of recommended private investigators, but he already knew he wouldn't need outside help. He'd learned surveillance in the army, and Julia had no idea how much he'd observed over the years. That evening, while Julia was at her book club, another lie, her book club met on Wednesdays, Ethan made a copy of her phone. The process was simpler than most people realized. Julia always plugged her phone into the charger on her nightstand when she showered. A simple adapter and software Ethan's tech-savvy mechanic Marco had recommended did the rest. 20 minutes later, Ethan had access to 6 months of text messages, call logs, and photos. What he found was worse than adultery. Text thread between Julia and Ava. October 15th. Julia, he has no idea. Still bringing home flowers and acting like nothing's changed. Ava. You almost feel bad for him. Julia. Almost. Did you move the money? Ava. Another 2,000. He'll never notice until it's too late. Julia. Perfect. Liam found us an apartment. Furnished, utilities included. Ava. When do you tell him? Julia. After the papers are served. Let the lawyers handle it. Text thread between Julia and Liam. October 20th. Liam. Miss you already. Julia. Tonight was perfect. I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. Liam. Soon. Have you seen his garage lately? Julia. What about it? Liam. Just thinking it would make a great workshop. After. Julia. Lowell. You want his tools too? Liam. Why not? He owes me for that lawsuit help anyway. Ethan read every message twice, his anger crystallizing into something colder and more focused. They weren't just stealing his money and destroying his marriage, they were planning to take his livelihood too. But it was the photos that pushed him over the edge. Buried in Julia's deleted files, which the software had recovered, were dozens of images she'd taken in their house, their bedroom, their kitchen, their bathroom. Julia posing in lingerie Ethan had never seen, positioned in spaces that were intimate and private. The photos were time-stamped from afternoons when Ethan was at work. Julia had been bringing Liam into their home, into their bed, and documenting it like a trophy collection. The final photo was taken in Ethan's garage workshop, Julia sitting on his workbench wearing nothing but one of his army t-shirts, giving the camera a knowing smile. The timestamp was from last Tuesday, the day Ethan had left work early with food poisoning. They'd been in his sanctuary, the one place that was entirely his, mocking him with their presence. Ethan closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of his garage, surrounded by the tools and projects that represented 20 years of building a life with someone who'd been planning to destroy it. When Julia's car pulled into the driveway at 10:15 p.m., Ethan was ready. How was book club? He asked when she came upstairs. Good. We're reading The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. You'd probably like it. Ethan nodded and smiled. I'll add it to my list. By the way, I think we should have Liam over for dinner soon. It's been a while since we've been social. Julia's face went pale. Why would you want to do that? Just being neighborly. Maybe this weekend? I don't think he's available. I'll ask him myself, Ethan said. I'm sure he'll make time. The beauty of having worked in military intelligence was understanding that information was power only if you used it correctly. Ethan spent the next week not confronting anyone, not making accusations, not tipping his hand in any way. Instead, he prepared. Marco, his most trusted mechanic, had served time for financial fraud before Ethan hired him. His skills hadn't atrophied. They'd simply found legal applications. Within 2 days, Marco had helped Ethan move their remaining joint assets into a legal trust that would freeze them during divorce proceedings. She can't touch this money now, Marco explained, showing Ethan the paperwork. But neither can you, without court approval. It's like putting everything in a box until the lawyers figure out who gets what. What about the money she already moved? That's theft, but you'll need to prove she moved it without your knowledge or consent. Ethan smiled grimly. I can do that. The next phase required patience. Ethan continued his normal routine, work, dinner with Julia, pretending their marriage wasn't a facade. But he was also documenting everything. Julia's schedule, tracked through GPS on her phone. Her spending patterns, recorded through their shared credit cards. Her conversations with Ava and Liam, captured through the phone monitoring software. More importantly, he was building his own case. Bank records showing Julia had exclusive access to the account she'd been draining. Credit card statements proving she'd been making purchases. Hotel rooms, dinners, lingerie that she'd hidden from him. phone records that would demonstrate the timeline of her relationship with Liam. By Friday, Ethan had assembled a file that would destroy Julia's divorce strategy and potentially land her in legal trouble for theft and fraud. But he wasn't ready to use it yet. Julia had spent months planning her attack. Ethan intended to be thorough in his defense. "I've been thinking about our conversation," Detective Hall said when he stopped by the shop that afternoon. "Still hypothetical?" "Not anymore." Rick glanced around the garage to make sure they were alone. "You need to be careful, Ethan. I've seen a lot of divorces go sideways when people try to get clever. Document everything, stay within the law, and let your lawyer handle the strategy. What if she's committed actual crimes? Then you report them through proper channels." "What kind of crimes are we talking about?" Ethan handed Rick a printed summary of the bank account activity. Rick studied it for several minutes, his expression growing serious. "This looks like embezzlement," he said finally. "If you can prove she moved this money without your knowledge or consent, it's theft. But prosecution would be up to the district attorney, not you. I can prove it. Then you need to file a report, today. This kind of thing doesn't get better with time." Ethan nodded, but he had no intention of involving the police yet. There were other ways to handle Julia's betrayal, ways that would ensure she understood exactly what she'd lost. That evening, Julia announced she would be working late again. "Big emergency in the ER," she said, not looking up from her dinner. "Multi-car accident. I might not be home until morning." "Do you need me to bring you anything?" "Coffee, food." "No, the hospital provides everything we need during crisis situations." Ethan nodded and finished his meal. After Julia left, he called the hospital. "I'm trying to reach my wife, Julia Reed," he told the night supervisor. "She said she'd be working late due to an emergency, but I can't reach her phone." "I'm sorry, sir, but Julia isn't scheduled tonight. In fact, she requested reduced hours starting last month." "She's only working 2 days a week now." Ethan thanked the supervisor and hung up. Then he drove to Liam's house. The curtains were drawn, but light leaked around the edges. Ethan parked at the trailhead behind the subdivision and hiked through the woods to his observation position. Through the kitchen window, he could see Julia and Liam cooking dinner together, laughing and touching like a couple, celebrating an anniversary. Ethan watched for 2 hours, taking photos with the telephoto lens Marco had acquired. Julia and Liam ate by candlelight, drank wine, and eventually moved to the living room where their silhouettes merged on the couch. At 11 p.m., Ethan hiked back to his truck and drove home. Julia's deception was now completely documented. Her theft was provable. Her adultery was undeniable. But Ethan wasn't ready to end this yet. Julia had spent months planning to destroy his life. He intended to return the favor. Saturday morning, Julia was cheerful and talkative, describing the horrible night she'd had dealing with trauma victims. She even showed him photos on her phone of what she claimed were her exhausted co-workers, photos that were actually downloaded from a nursing blog, which Ethan verified later. "I think we should plan something special," Ethan said over coffee. "A romantic dinner. Just the two of us. It feels like we haven't connected in months." Julia's smile faltered slightly. "That sounds nice, but I'm really busy with work right now. When would be good for you?" "Let me check my schedule and get back to you." Ethan spent the afternoon in his garage organizing tools and thinking. Julia was trapped in her web of lies, but she didn't know it yet. She thought she was controlling the timeline, managing the revelation of her betrayal according to her plan. She was wrong. Sunday evening, Ethan called Julia's bluff. "I made dinner reservations for Tuesday night," he announced. "That new Italian place downtown. 7 o'clock? I can't Tuesday. I already confirmed you're not scheduled to work Tuesday." Julia froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" "I called the hospital. You're not working Tuesday. In fact, you're barely working at all anymore." The color drained from Julia's face. "Ethan, I can explain." "Can you?" "Because I'd love to hear how you explain working late shifts that don't exist while spending money we don't have on things I've never seen." Julia set down her fork with deliberate care. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" "I'm not accusing you of anything," Ethan said calmly. "I'm stating facts. You've been lying about your schedule for months. You've been moving money from our joint account into one I don't have access to. And you've been doing it with Ava's help. That's theft." Ethan finished. At minimum, it's theft. Depending on how long you've been planning this, it might be fraud. Julia stood up abruptly. I'm not having this conversation. Yes, you are. Sit down. Something in Ethan's voice made Julia hesitate. For the first time since this had started, she was seeing a man she didn't recognize, someone harder and more dangerous than the husband who'd been fixing her car and bringing her flowers for 8 years. Sit down, Julia. She sat. You filed for divorce 5 days ago without telling me, Ethan continued. You've been stealing our money for 6 months. You've been having an affair with our neighbor for God knows how long. And you've been doing all of it while pretending to love me, while lying to my face every single day. Julia's hands trembled as she reached for her wineglass. Ethan, our marriage has been over for years. We both know that. Do we? Because I didn't get that memo. I've been working 60-hour weeks to build something for us while you've been planning to tear it all down. You work all the time, Julia said, her voice gaining strength. You care more about that garage than you do about me. When's the last time we talked about anything besides work and bills? When's the last time you gave me a chance to... Julia looked away. This isn't working anymore. We both deserve to be happy. You're right, Ethan agreed. We do both deserve to be happy. The difference is I was trying to build happiness with you, while you were building it behind my back with someone else. Liam and I are going to be very surprised by what happens next, Ethan finished. You want a divorce? Fine. But you're not going to rob me blind in the process. And you're sure as heck not going to do it while pretending to be the victim. Julia stood again, this time more steadily. I don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do. Because tomorrow morning, I'm filing a police report for theft. I'm providing my lawyer with evidence of your adultery. And I'm making sure everyone understands exactly what kind of person you really are. You can't. I can. I have bank records, phone logs, photographs. I have evidence of every lie you've told and every dollar you've stolen. Your divorce attorney prepared for a negotiation, Julia. What they're going to get is a war. Julia stared at him for a long moment, and Ethan saw the exact moment she realized how completely she'd underestimated him. I never meant for it to happen this way, she said quietly. Yes, you did. You planned every bit of this. You just never planned for getting caught. Julia left the kitchen without another word. Ethan heard her moving around upstairs, then her car starting in the garage. She didn't come home that night. By morning, Ethan's real plan was already in motion. Monday morning, Ethan didn't file a police report. Instead, he made 3 phone calls that would destroy Liam Coyle's life more effectively than any court case. The first was to the Department of Labor's anonymous tip line, reporting a contractor who was employing undocumented workers without proper safety protocols. Ethan provided Liam's business license number, his work address, and a detailed description of violations he'd observed while doing electrical work at Liam's shop 6 months earlier. The second was to the Better Business Bureau, reporting fraudulent billing practices based on complaints Ethan had heard from other customers over the years. The third was to an IRS fraud hotline, suggesting they investigate a contractor who appeared to be underreporting income while maintaining a lifestyle that suggested significantly higher earnings. All 3 calls were made from a burner phone Marco had provided. All 3 were untraceable, and all 3 would trigger investigations that would take months to resolve, but would immediately suspend Liam's business operations. That's cold, Marco observed when Ethan explained what he'd done. Effective, but cold. He wanted to take my tools, Ethan replied. Now he won't have a business to use them in. The beauty of Ethan's approach was that he hadn't lied about anything. Liam did employ workers whose immigration status was questionable. He did have a history of billing disputes. And his tax returns probably wouldn't survive careful scrutiny. Ethan had simply accelerated the discovery of problems that already existed. By Wednesday afternoon, Liam's phones were ringing with canceled contracts, and his bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. By Friday, he was facing the loss of his business license and potential criminal charges. Ethan knew all of this because Julia called him, crying, begging him to call off the investigations. I don't know what you're talking about, Ethan said calmly. If Liam's having business problems, that's between him and the authorities. You know exactly what I'm talking about. This is about us, not him. Actually, it's about him sleeping with my wife in my house while planning to steal my tools. But you're right that it's not entirely about business. What do you want, Ethan? I want you to understand consequences. Julia hung up, but she called back an hour later. Liam needs money for lawyers, she said. I can't access our accounts because of whatever you did with the trust. Then I guess you shouldn't have stolen $15,000. That was for both of us. I was trying to save money for our future. Our future? Ethan laughed. Julia, you filed for divorce and emptied our accounts. There is no our future. I made mistakes, but this is too much. Liam could go to prison. Liam could go to prison because he broke the law. I didn't make him hire illegal workers or lie on his taxes. But you reported him. I don't know what you're talking about. That evening, Ethan received an unexpected visitor. Detective Hall knocked on his door at 8 p.m., looking official and uncomfortable. We need to talk, Rick said. They sat in Ethan's kitchen while Rick explained that Liam Coyle had filed a complaint alleging harassment and false reporting. He claims you made false reports to multiple agencies in retaliation for a personal dispute, Rick said. Did you? I haven't filed any reports against Liam Coyle. Ethan. I haven't filed any reports, Ethan repeated. I don't know what personal dispute he's referring to. We've always been friendly neighbors. Rick stared at him for a long moment. The investigations are real. Labor Department showed up at his job site yesterday with a warrant. If the reports were false, then the investigations will clear him, and he'll have nothing to worry about, Ethan finished. If they weren't false, then he brought this on himself. You're playing a dangerous game. I'm not playing anything. My wife is divorcing me and trying to steal our assets. My neighbor apparently has business problems with federal agencies. Those are separate issues. Rick sighed and stood up. Be careful, Ethan. This kind of thing has a way of escalating. I'll keep that in mind. After Rick left, Ethan's phone rang. It was Julia. The police came to see you, she said without preamble. Yes. What did you tell them? The truth. I haven't filed any reports against Liam. That's a technicality, and you know it. Julia, let me ask you something. When you were planning this divorce, when you were stealing our money, when you were sleeping with Liam, did you think about consequences? Of course I did. Did you think about what would happen if I found out? Julia was quiet for a moment. I thought you'd be hurt, but I thought you'd get over it. You thought I'd just roll over and let you destroy everything we built together? I thought you'd be reasonable. Ethan laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Reasonable? Julia, you committed theft, adultery, and fraud. You lied to my face for months while planning to take half of everything I've worked for. What part of that is reasonable? I never wanted to hurt you, but you did hurt me. And now you're discovering that actions have consequences. This isn't over, Ethan. No, he agreed. It's not. But Julia had no idea how right she was, or how much worse things were about to get. The next phase of Ethan's plan required patience and precision. While Liam struggled with federal investigations and legal fees, Ethan turned his attention to Ava Thompson. Ava worked in hospital billing, which gave her access to patient information, insurance data, and financial records. More importantly, it required her to maintain strict confidentiality and ethical standards. A single violation could end her career permanently. Ethan spent a week studying Ava's social media profiles, her work history, and her personal relationships. What he found was a woman who lived beyond her means, maintained expensive tastes, and had a history of bending rules when it suited her purposes. More importantly, he found that Ava had been bragging about her financial consulting work on social media, posting photos of expensive purchases and vacations that her salary couldn't support. On Thursday evening, Ethan sent an anonymous email to the hospital's compliance department, suggesting they investigate whether any billing department employees were engaged in unauthorized financial consulting that might create conflicts of interest or violate patient privacy regulations. The email included links to Ava's social media posts, copies of her public financial consulting advertisements, and a suggestion that they examine whether any patient billing information had been used to solicit private clients. By Monday, Ava was suspended pending investigation. By Wednesday, she was terminated for ethics violations and potential HIPAA breaches. By Friday, her husband had filed for separation after discovering that her consulting fees had come from helping friends commit financial fraud. She's having a breakdown, Julia informed Ethan during one of their increasingly hostile phone conversations. She's talking about suicide. That's terrible, Ethan replied. She should seek professional help. You did this to her. I didn't make Ava steal money or violate patient privacy. I didn't make her lie to her husband about her income. I didn't make her commit ethics violations at work. You reported her, just like you reported Liam. Julia, I think you're confused about something. I didn't create these problems. I just stopped ignoring them. What's that supposed to mean? It means that for months, I've been watching the people closest to me lie, steal, and cheat while pretending to be good, honest people. All I did was help reveal the truth about who you really are. We're not the villains here, Ethan. Aren't you? You stole from me. Ava helped you. Liam slept with you in our bed while planning to take my tools. If that doesn't make you villains, what does? Julia was quiet for a long moment. What do you want from us? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to experience what it feels like to lose everything you've worked for. I want you to know what betrayal costs. And then what? And then we'll see. By the third week of November, Julia's carefully constructed new life had collapsed completely. Liam was facing criminal charges and financial ruin, unable to provide the stability she'd been counting on. Ava was unemployed, divorced, and struggling with depression serious enough to require hospitalization. And Julia herself was discovering that adultery and theft weren't strong foundations for starting over. Her divorce attorney had recommended accepting Ethan's terms after reviewing the evidence he'd assembled. The photos, bank records, and communications logs painted a picture of systematic deception that would make Julia look like a calculating predator in front of any judge. You need to consider settling, her lawyer advised during a meeting Ethan knew about, because he'd paid Marco to install a listening device in her purse. Your husband has enough evidence to file criminal charges, and his documentation of the financial misconduct is bulletproof. What are his terms? Julia asked. He keeps the house, the business, and the vehicles. You get nothing except your personal belongings and whatever assets you can prove you brought into the marriage independently. That's everything we built together, which you forfeited when you stole from joint accounts and committed adultery. Mrs. Reed, your husband could have you arrested for theft. He could sue you for fraud. He could destroy your nursing license by reporting your involvement in Ava's billing schemes. The fact that he's offering you anything is generous. Julia left that meeting and drove directly to Ethan's shop. I want to talk, she said, standing in the doorway of his office while his mechanics pretended not to listen. We can talk through lawyers. Please, just give me 5 minutes. Ethan gestured to a chair across from his desk. Julia sat down and immediately started crying. I know I made mistakes, she began. Mistakes? Ethan interrupted. Julia, you didn't make mistakes. You made choices. Dozens of them over months, all designed to steal from me and humiliate me. I was unhappy. So talk to me. Go to counseling. Ask for a separation. Don't commit crimes. Julia wiped her eyes with a tissue from Ethan's desk. I was scared you wouldn't let me go. Let you go? Julia, I'm not your warden. If you wanted a divorce, you could have asked for one without robbing me. You would have fought me for everything. I would have negotiated fairly. The difference is you decided to lie and steal instead of being honest. What do you want me to do? Julia asked desperately. I want you to sign the settlement agreement and disappear from my life. Ethan, please. I know I hurt you, but this is destroying innocent people. Ava didn't deserve what happened to her. Ava helped you steal $15,000 from me. She violated federal privacy laws to help you plan your escape. How is she innocent? She was just trying to help a friend. She was trying to help a friend commit crimes. There's a difference. Julia leaned forward in her chair. What about forgiveness? What about the 8 years we had together? What about them? You threw them away the first time you decided to lie to me instead of talking to me? I still love you. Ethan stared at her for a long moment. No, you don't. You love the idea of not losing everything you took for granted. There's a difference. Julia stood up abruptly. Fine. You want to play hardball? We'll play hardball. I'm not signing anything. That's your choice. But understand what you're choosing. If this goes to trial, everything becomes public record. Every text message, every photo, every financial transaction. Your affair with Liam will be front-page news in a town where everyone knows everyone. Your theft will be documented in court records that follow you forever. Your nursing license will be reviewed by a board that doesn't like nurses who steal from their families. Julia's face went pale. You wouldn't. I don't want to. But if you force me to fight, I'll fight to win. She left without another word, but Ethan knew she'd be back. People like Julia always came back when they realized they'd overplayed their hand. 3 days later, she signed the settlement agreement. But Ethan wasn't finished. The final phase of his plan required Julia to understand not just financial consequences, but personal ones. She needed to experience the isolation and helplessness she'd intended for him. Julia had moved into a small apartment across town, funded by the last of the money she'd stolen before Ethan froze their accounts. But maintaining that apartment required income she no longer had. Ava's termination had made it clear that anyone who helped Julia financially was risking their own career and reputation. More importantly, Julia was discovering that small towns have long memories and little patience for women who destroy their marriages through theft and adultery. Ethan didn't have to spread rumors or gossip. The truth was devastating enough. Julia's former friends at the hospital were avoiding her. Her family, who'd learned about the theft through court documents, were refusing to take her calls. Even her favorite restaurants and shops had become uncomfortable places where whispered conversations followed her everywhere. By December, Julia was working part-time at a medical clinic 30 miles away, the only place that would hire a nurse with pending ethical violations. Her apartment was a studio in the worst part of town, furnished with donations from a charity that helped domestic violence victims. The irony wasn't lost on Ethan. Julia had created her own victimhood through the choices she'd made. But it was the discovery of who owned her apartment building that finally broke her completely. "You son of a bitch!" she screamed into her phone when she called Ethan on Christmas Eve. "You own this place!" "You've been my landlord for 2 months. I own several rental properties," Ethan replied calmly. "It's good investment strategy. You've been watching me, controlling where I live. I've been collecting rent from a tenant who's consistently late with payments. This is harassment. This is business. You signed a lease with property management company. If you don't like the arrangement, you're free to move. With what money? You took everything. I kept what was mine and recovered what you stole." "There's a difference." Julia was crying now. The ugly, desperate sobs of someone who'd finally realized how completely they'd lost. "What do you want from me, Ethan?" "What will it take for this to end? I want you to understand what you did to me. I understand. I hurt you. I'm sorry. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry you lost. You're not sorry you tried to destroy me. That's not true, isn't it? If your plan had worked, if I'd never discovered the affair or the theft, would you be sorry now?" Julia was quiet for so long, Ethan thought she'd hung up. "No," she whispered finally. "I'd be happy. That's the difference between us, Julia. I'm sorry you forced me to do this. You'd be happy if you'd gotten away with destroying me. So what happens now? Now you live with the consequences of your choices. Forever? That's up to you. If you rebuild your life honestly, if you stop trying to manipulate and steal your way to happiness, maybe you'll find some peace. But it won't be with me, and it won't be at my expense." Julia hung up, but Ethan knew she'd call again. Desperation had a way of making people persistent. He was right. She called back an hour later. "I have a proposition," she said. "I'm listening. Meet me tomorrow. One last conversation. Face to face." "Why?" "Because I think you deserve to hear the truth. All of it, and I think I deserve the chance to say it." Ethan considered the request. Julia was cornered, desperate, and out of options. She was also dangerous in the way that people with nothing left to lose often were. But he was curious about what truth she thought she'd been withholding. "Where?" he asked. "Do you remember that cabin we rented for our anniversary 3 years ago?" The one by Miller's Lake, Ethan remembered. It had been one of their last genuinely happy weekends together, before Julia had started pulling away and planning her betrayal. "I remember. I'll meet you there tomorrow at noon, just us. No lawyers, no phones, no recordings. Just the truth. Julia, please, Ethan, give me this one thing. Let me explain why this happened. Let me try to make you understand." Ethan agreed, though he had no intention of going unarmed or unprepared. Julia might be desperate enough to try something stupid, and he'd survived 2 wars by never underestimating an enemy's willingness to do desperate things. Miller's Lake sat 40 miles north of town, surrounded by dense woods and accessible only by a single gravel road. The cabin Julia had chosen was isolated enough that screams wouldn't carry and remote enough that cell phone service was sporadic at best. Ethan arrived 30 minutes early and circled the property twice before parking. Julia's Honda was already there, but she was nowhere to be seen. The cabin looked exactly as he remembered it. Rustic, romantic, the kind of place where couples went to reconnect. The irony was perfect. Ethan checked his sidearm, a Glock 19 he'd carried since his army days, and approached the cabin carefully. The front door was unlocked, which immediately put him on alert. Julia was many things, but careless wasn't one of them. The interior of the cabin had been transformed into something between a shrine and a courtroom. Every surface was covered with photographs, documents, and printed emails. Their wedding photos were pinned to one wall next to bank statements showing the money Julia had stolen. Screenshots of her text conversations with Liam and Ava were taped to the kitchen cabinets. Court documents from their divorce were spread across the dining table like evidence in a trial. In the center of it all, Julia sat in a wooden chair, dressed in the same blue dress she'd worn on their first date 8 years ago. "Hello, Ethan," she said quietly. "Julia." He remained standing near the door, his hand resting casually near his weapon. "Interesting decorating choices. I wanted you to see it all laid out, everything I did, everything you did in response. The complete picture." Ethan's eyes swept the room, taking in the scope of documentation. "Looks like you've been busy." "I've had time to think. About us, about what I did, about what you've done since. And what conclusions have you reached?" Julia stood up slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. "I concluded that we're both monsters, Ethan. The difference is you're better at it than I am. Explain that. What I did was selfish and cruel. I lied to you, stole from you, betrayed you. I destroyed our marriage for my own happiness." Ethan nodded. "That's accurate. But what you did in response, that was art. You didn't just hurt me back. You systematically destroyed everything I cared about, everyone who helped me, every possibility I had for rebuilding my life. You studied me like a military target and then eliminated me piece by piece. You committed crimes, Julia. I documented them and ensured there were consequences. You drove Ava to attempt suicide. Ava drove herself to attempt suicide by violating federal privacy laws and helping you commit theft. You destroyed Liam's business and got him arrested. Liam destroyed his own business by hiring illegal workers and evading taxes. I simply expedited the discovery of crimes he was already committing." Julia walked to the wall covered with their wedding photos. "Do you remember this day?" "I remember thinking I was marrying someone honest. I was honest then. We both were." She touched one of the photos gently. "When did we become people who could hurt each other this completely?" "You became that person when you decided to steal from me instead of talking to me." "I became that person when I decided you needed to understand consequences." Julia turned back to face him. "Do you feel better now that you've won?" Ethan considered the question seriously. "I feel balanced. You tried to destroy my life, so I destroyed yours. You tried to take everything from me, so I took everything from you. That's not winning. That's justice." "Justice?" Julia laughed, a sound with an edge of hysteria. "Ethan, you didn't pursue justice. You pursued revenge, and you were brilliant at it." "Thank you." That wasn't a compliment. Ethan moved further into the room, studying the evidence Julia had assembled. "Why did you bring me here, Julia? What's the point of this conversation?" "I wanted you to see what you've become." "Which is what?" "Someone who could calculate the exact amount of pain to inflict on another person. Someone who could systematically destroy 3 lives and call it justice. Someone who could protect himself from people who tried to rob and humiliate him," Ethan corrected. "Someone who refused to be a victim." Julia picked up a manila folder from the dining table. "I have something for you." "What is it?" "Proof that you were right about everything. Bank records showing exactly how much money I stole. Phone records documenting every lie I told. Photos showing every time Liam and I were together in your house." Ethan frowned. "I already have all of that." "Not like this. This is my confession, signed and notarized. A complete admission of guilt with no attempt to justify or excuse what I did." She held out the folder. "I thought you might want it for your files." Ethan took the folder, but didn't open it. "Why?" "Because you deserve to know that I understand exactly what I did to you. And because I want you to understand exactly what you did to me, I already understand what I did to you. Do you? Do you know that I've lost 23 pounds because I can't afford to eat regularly? Do you know that I've applied for 47 jobs and been rejected by all of them because word has spread about my financial irregularities? Do you know that my own mother won't take my calls because she's ashamed of what I did? Ethan opened the folder and scanned the documents inside. Julia's confession was thorough, detailed, and completely incriminating. It was also unnecessary. He already had enough evidence to convict her 10 times over. "Why are you giving me this?" he asked. "Because I want you to win completely. I want there to be no doubt, no ambiguity, no possibility that anyone could ever claim I was the victim in this situation. Julia, I also want you to know that I'm done fighting. I'm not going to appeal the divorce settlement. I'm not going to try to rebuild my life here. I'm not going to cause you any more problems." Ethan studied her face, looking for deception or manipulation. All he saw was exhaustion. "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet. Somewhere far enough away that I won't remind you of what happened between us. You don't have to run away." "Yes, I do. Because staying means watching you rebuild your life while mine stays destroyed. Staying means living in a town where everyone knows what I did and no one will ever forgive me for it." Julia walked to the fireplace and picked up a book of matches. "There's one more thing." "What?" "I want you to burn it." "Burn what?" "All of this." She gestured to the photos and documents covering every surface. "Our marriage, our history, the evidence of what we did to each other. I want you to light a match and burn it all down." Ethan looked around the cabin, at 8 years of shared history reduced to evidence in a case that was already closed. "Why?" "Because we're both carrying this poison around and it's killing us." "You won, Ethan. You proved your point. You got your justice. But if you keep carrying this anger, it's going to destroy the rest of your life, just like my guilt is destroying mine." She held out the matches. "Burn it down and walk away. Let this be over." Ethan took the matches and struck one, watching the flame dance in the dim light of the cabin. For a moment, he imagined touching it to the pile of photographs on the nearest table, watching their wedding pictures curl and blacken, destroying the last physical evidence of what they'd built together. Then he blew out the match. "No, Ethan, I'm not burning anything, Julia. This isn't some symbolic gesture that's going to heal us both. This is documentation of what happens when someone tries to destroy my life." Julia's face crumpled. "So this never ends?" "It ended when you signed the divorce papers. Everything since then has been you learning to live with the consequences of your choices." "And you? When do you learn to live with the consequences of yours?" Ethan pocketed the folder of Julia's confession and headed for the door. "I'm living with them, just fine." "Ethan, wait." He turned back. Julia was standing in the middle of the cabin, surrounded by the evidence of their mutual destruction, tears streaming down her face. "I loved you," she said. "Before all of this, before I ruined everything, I really did love you." "I know," Ethan replied. "That's what makes this so unforgivable." He walked outside, leaving Julia alone with the photographs and documents that told the story of how two people could systematically destroy each other. Behind him, he heard the scratch of a match being struck, then the crackle of paper catching fire. By the time he reached his truck, smoke was already seeping from the cabin's windows. Julia had decided to burn it all down after all. Ethan drove away without looking back, the folder of her confession on the passenger seat and the taste of ashes in the air. Behind him, 8 years of marriage and months of warfare went up in flames, leaving nothing but smoke and silence. 3 hours later, when the volunteer fire department arrived, they found nothing but charred timber and the melted remains of a Honda Civic in the driveway. Julia Reed was declared missing, presumed dead, though her body was never found. Ethan read about the fire in the newspaper the next morning while drinking coffee in his kitchen. The article described it as a tragic accident, possibly caused by faulty wiring in an old cabin. There was no mention of arson, no suggestion of foul play. Detective Hall stopped by the shop that afternoon. "Heard about your ex-wife," he said, leaning against Ethan's workbench. "Terrible tragedy," Ethan replied, not looking up from the engine he was rebuilding. "She called you yesterday, didn't she? Right before she drove up to that cabin?" "She did. Wanted to apologize, I think." Said she was leaving town. And you didn't think to mention that when we talked this morning? Ethan finally looked up. Rick, my ex-wife called to say goodbye. 12 hours later, she died in a fire 40 miles away. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just trying to understand the timeline. The timeline is simple. Julia destroyed our marriage. I divorced her. She couldn't handle the consequences and decided to run away. The fire was either an accident or... Ethan shrugged. Or what? Or she decided she'd rather die than live with what she'd done. Rick studied Ethan's face for a long moment. You seem pretty calm for someone whose wife just died. Ex-wife. And Rick, Julia tried to steal my life's work and run off with another man. We've been divorced for 2 months. I'm sad she's dead, but I'm not going to pretend we were still in love. Fair enough? Rick straightened up. Just so you know, the investigation is routine. No one suspects foul play. Good to know. After Rick left, Ethan returned to his work. The engine he was rebuilding belonged to a young couple who'd brought their car in with a blown-head gasket. It was fixable, but it would take time, patience, and attention to detail, just like everything else worth doing. 6 months later, Ethan sold his auto shop and moved to Montana, where he bought a small ranch and started breeding horses. He never married again, never spoke about his first wife, and never returned to the town where he'd learned that love and loyalty meant nothing to people who valued their own happiness more than the promises they'd made. Sometimes, late at night, he would think about Julia and wonder if she'd really died in that fire, or if she'd simply disappeared, leaving her car behind as evidence of a death that would free her from the consequences of her choices forever. But it didn't matter. Either way, she was gone, and Ethan Reed had finally found peace in the knowledge that some battles are worth fighting to the very end, even when victory tastes like ashes and smoke. He lit a match, watched the folder burn, and walked into the woods without turning back.